Hello fellow shapers, back with the next in my instalment of identifying trees. Today's tree is going to be, I think you've guessed it, the birch. I'm going to be concentrating mainly on the silver birch today. It's also called Betula pendula. Betula is another word for birch. And pendula, there's often hints with these names. Pendula meaning swinging. I'll tell you why later. The downy birch up in Scotland is also called Betula because of the birch and its pubescence, which again, there's a hint in the name. It's often considered to be a slightly more hairy. So we won't go into details about that, but yeah, they're the names. So today, as I say, we're looking at the silver birch. It's a hardwood. It's often straight-poled, very useful, and one of my favourite trees. It's definitely in my top 5 because of the sheer amount of uses that you can make things from this and aid things from this. It's a very helping tree. It's very recognisable in the woods, mainly because of its pallor. You don't see that colour very often, especially with these horizontal lenticles going across like that. It's often compared to the silver birch is often compared to 3 sheep, 2 white, 1 black, and that often is the kind of pattern that you get going with this tree. It can grow up to 30 meters, possibly more in the right conditions. Generally though, about 20 meters, as most of the species don't grow to the right age or ripe age in a woods like this. They will often die mid-aged. But that said, they're very quick to grow and replace each other, and they're happy to do that. And each tree that lives and dies leaves the forest in a better situation than it was before. So the quicker they go through their process, the quicker the soil gets filled with nitrogen, mainly. They start off young and smooth bark. As they get older, they start getting a little bit more rustic, but still generally smooth. This one is at mid-age and it's starting to actually shed its bark, and it's very papery, often called paper birch. This can be used for many different things. Show you closer. Yeah, there you can clearly see the papery effect that the bark has as it kind of sheds its skin. You can take a little bit of this and it won't cause much damage because it is just new skin. So I'll put that in the pocket for later. They are tall, straight, alternate branched. Also the stems, the pentacles in the stems are alternate. So it's not a fan of symmetry, although it is really quite a nice tall straight tree, as you can see. It will shed its lower branches in favour of growing more up the top. This is a tree that is very much in a hurry to get some of that canopy up the top there. And they will grow quite uniform, usually in a woods like this, to roughly the same height. Any that stand above it are vulnerable to wind, as these are quite shallow rooted and easy to topple, especially in the marsh conditions that we've got. It can be confused with the alder, which I've already featured, and the hazel, which I've already featured, as they are both in the birch family. Mainly the leaf is similar to the hazel, although the hazel is much larger, and also mainly with the alder is it can look a little bit like it sometimes, with the horizontal legions, ventricles. The leaves are, let's have a look. The leaves are roughly this size, not very big, quite small, arrow-headed shape, serrated edges along the sides of the leaf, and usually will come to a nice sharp point. As I said, it's alternate stem structure. These will be bright green, turning to yellow in the autumn, and they are one of the first to show themselves in the spring in the form of leaf, as is a lot of the birch family. In fact, they're all very early starters. Unfortunately, I don't have a northern downy birch at hand, so I can't show you the leaves for that, but I've seen pictures of them and they are basically rounder and I believe hairier. If anyone could update me on those, that would be handy. It looks like I'm going to have a trip up Scotland at some point to check these out as part of my tree identification list. Amongst other things, it's the Caledonian forest up there is very much, a large part of it is birch, downy birch. Scotland kind of has a east-west divide with the downy birch and the silver birch. The silver birch prefer a well-drained soil, and the downy birch is quite happy in the colder marshes. The bark is usually thinner the further down south of the UK you go, and thicker up north. Also, this is true to the point that the wood is slightly whiter down south, and in silver birch generally. It's a lovely pure white hardwood. Many uses, very useful wood. Will go into uses, don't know about shortly, but soon I hope. It's also said to have a satin finish with the silver birch, which can be used for some very nice pieces of turning wood, or even surface layers, flooring and all kinds of things really. It thrives, or is quite happy to live in the marsh or bogland alongside the alder, as they are both pioneer species. They will spread themselves out from the water outwards. Normally the alder will be closest to the stream, but not always the case. The silver birch are quite happy to be pretty much on top of it, as they are very much a water-loving tree. But that said, it is also quite happy to dry on dry land. So it's a very versatile tree, more so than perhaps the alder. The lifespan of these things is very similar to human. They can reach, very oldest anyway, can reach up to 120, which is similar to the human, but the average or a common age is 70, which is very similar to us, and they're very quick growing. So you could plant effectively a birch on your birth, and it would be there with you for life, and then probably give up the ghost roughly around the same time, depending on lots of possibilities and situations and environmental factors. But that's often looked at as the start and the end and the journey in between. As I said, it's a hardwood, and it's even actually harder than mahogany, and equally as hard as oak. But very different trees and useful in very different ways. So not really comparable in any other way, apart from it's a tough bit of wood. It's a pleasure to carve so long as it's wet and not too thick. As it dries, it becomes a little bit more tricky to carve. But that said, you can come up with some Beautiful creations, often in that pure white. I've made many spoons, and spoons is a good thing to do because it's actually got some abilities in there to stop pests and diseases, and basically like an antiseptic. So anything made out of it has that ability. It's found throughout the northern hemisphere. It's famous mostly in Finland. It's very widespread there and very liked in Finland, and I can understand why. This is a beautiful tree with a lot of practical purposes, and it is often the beginning of life in an area. Finland has many stories about this tree, one of which is very similar to Cinderella. Throughout the middle part anyway. The start and the end is a bit different, but otherwise it's Cinderella. I guess it was the beginning of Cinderella. I don't think Cinderella was before the Finnish folklore. I'm pretty damn sure of that. So Cinderella is only really half the story. So yeah, you can search that up if you like. It's a bit long-winded for me to go through. I have tried and it took bloody ages. So yeah, look that up. I think it's fair to say we don't need a lot on the identification of this tree, as most people will know it. A lot of people will know this birch tree. Even our children, who are thankfully learning something from these computer games, and this is heavily featured in Minecraft as one of the 4 species of tree, or 3 species of tree that are in that game. I've chopped many down myself in the game. It's a very clever game. One of the better ones for the younger gamers, I think, to be honest, as it teaches you just a few things rather than just a load of complete science fiction. It's represented in that as pure white and black lenticels, and the reason being it's heavily featured, I think, in Minecraft is that it's a very popular tree, but also the programmer for Minecraft was from Finland. So fascinating, really. So like I say, we don't need a lot in the way of identification, I don't think, thankfully, because it's getting very dark and I think it's actually going to chuck it down. So I might continue this tomorrow, or I might continue it tonight in my tent. Maybe the folklore tonight. Anyway, we shall see. Stay tuned. So we've got a waterway running through this little bit of woodland. There's lots of waterways actually, and you'll notice that there's lots of birch hanging around, supporting the banks slightly, but also amongst these birch you'll find other species, which is the goat willow, which I've previously identified. You can tell by the bark structure on the goat willow is the best giveaway, and also the little cones. And as we go into here, we get towards the alder, which can be mistaken quite easily for the birch. We could go into uses for this fantastic piece of wood. General uses in manufacture and stuff like that would be turning. It's good for wood turning. It's good for satin finishes on cabinets, shelves, flooring. It's strong, but it's light, so it was a preferred material back in old school days when they used to make wooden planes and then throw them from a hill with the updrafts. Would have been traditionally made out of this birch. Also real planes were made out of the birch because of its strong versus light ability. Obviously that appeals for the aviation sector. So yeah, its main use probably is paper. It makes a good paper mush. Also traditionally it was used for toys, making of toys, before plastic was invented. There would be birch toys, because again it's light, it's relatively easy to shape, although it is a hard wood, but if you've got the tools, it's a good piece of wood to play around with. And also it's kind of anti-toxic abilities to withstand diseases, pests and things like that. It is safe for the children to play with, quite frankly. Doesn't matter if they put it in their mouth or anything and chew on it like quite often kids do. Also, along the younger audience side of things, I think you'll find that skateboards are made out of this, and I've had several skateboards myself, because it makes a very good ply wood in sheets. I think the skateboard was about 5 ply, but it was very thin ply. Again, it's light and strength, which is what you want, and in the ply form. There's a green finch, which you will often see in this area, because they love the birch. I would show you on the camera, but as soon as I move it's going to be off. So yeah, skateboards, and very fine ply, super tough wood. Traditional uses for this material are far too many to, it was used for just about everything really. I believe the Native Americans would use it to wrap food substances up in the bark as a kind of preservative whilst they travelled. Green finch is back. I want to show you the green finch. You can hear him. I believe it's a male because it's got plenty of colour, and that's usually the case in the bird world, or quite often anyway. But there he is. Don't know whether it's the same one. Oh, that lovely little cheep I spoke over. And he's gone. Anyway, he came and said hello. But they love this birch wood, as we'll probably discuss later, I don't know. Nature generally does. It's got so many uses, mainly because this bark is actually very water resistant because of the oil, effectively, that's inside there, the tannins or whatever. And so therefore can be used for making small bowls, cups, even going up to baskets out of this bark. And then that's got the added benefit of keeping things fresh and relatively pest resilient. But the list goes on and on really. Footwear, the thicker barked versions, not this silver birch, but the thicker ones can make canoes, which would have been found probably in America and Northern America area, but also in Scotland. Out of the downy birch. Then there would be poles. It makes a good straight pole, so fencing. It takes a long time for it to dry out. As you can see with this one, this has been down for nearly 2 years, and that isn't rotten in a hurry, mainly because of the pest resilience that it's got, but also the amount of water that it holds. It's very wet wood, very hard, very strong, and there is a bit of bend, not as much as some of the woods. As I mentioned before, the broomsticks would have been made out of these. I did make one. I guess I could show you that now. Yeah. I found these to be very effective for clearing out any debris. And these would drop around now and prepare you for spring. Spring is often thought as the time of year to clean out and make ready for the new year, or the spring cleaning. So that probably originates a little bit from these branches, which fall in abundance around January, February time, and they still have quite a little bit of suppleness to them. Just bind them to a big long pole with 2 straps onto a pole and then sweep. It took me about 5 minutes to make that broom. Very quick project, and it's definitely proven very handy and works better than I first expected it would. So yeah, why not? Make yourself a little birch broom. Take 5 minutes. Other traditional uses would be the Vikings. It was most used by the Vikings because it could be burnt whether it's fresh or dry. I mean, you would have to have a big fire, and I'm guessing these Vikings didn't have very small fires, so they were able to, because of the oil content in the bark, it would actually burn with enough heat. And that was the most common species available in the area for them. So they used birch more than most, probably, for lots and lots of things, and no doubt a few wounds on the battlefield. Other more, say, bushcraft uses, but traditional as well, definitely, is to collect the sap water, which I have featured on my channel. A nice friendly way of doing it, rather than making huge great Swiss cheeses out of the trees. You don't need to do that. Have a look for my method, which is much kinder to the tree, and you're able to get just as much, just as quickly, and then just seal it up and carry on. This drink is very high in nutrients, especially some of them, so you don't want to drink too much, otherwise you overdo the nutrients, which actually has a negative effect. Roughly half a pint, maybe pushed to half a litre, and you've got your recommended daily allowance of certainly some of those minerals and vitamins. Maybe not all of it, but yeah. But this would have been a very handy tonic coming out of the winter months for the human species, because there wasn't many other minerals and vitamins really around at that time of year. So it would have been a very welcome drink in many ways. It doesn't keep for very long, only about 3 days before it becomes, starts to ferment. You can actually make a beer or wine out of it. I haven't tried this, but that would be interesting to try it, because it's just a gentle flavoured water, really. So I'd be interested to see what kind of wine you could get out of that. Slightly sweet, slightly woody. Interesting. You'll know when it's time to stop drinking it because it starts to taste bitter. That's usually around the beginning of April, possibly end of March. But it will lose its sweetness and not become that palatable really. So you will notice that. It's only about 2 or 3 weeks that you can tap or prune a branch, in my case, for 2 or 3 weeks worth of drink. Traditionally that has been the second week in March, although I've found you can get away with the first week in March now, if not earlier, due to changes in environmental behaviours. Other than that, it's just a very cold, refreshing drink. But not hugely different from water. So if you're not sure about harming the tree or something, just get yourself some water, because it's not far off in taste value. I wouldn't buy the stuff that you can get because they add tons of sugar to it apparently, which means they probably harvest it when it's bitter. Not saying that it loses its abilities and whatnot, which it has got some benefits, but it's not going to be the same straight out of the tree. It's a good skill to show the young ones. You might be able to grab their attention away from their tablets for 5 minutes and show them that you can get this drink from a tree. You know, that might, as I say, 5 minutes, but a lesson that's quite enjoyable for both, I think you'll find. It can be used as a basic toothbrush. It turns kind of papery, fibrous material in the mouth when you chew it up a little bit. That is just the young branches on the tree. I'm just chewing them up and attempting to create. I mean, a toothbrush is better, but this is been used over the many years in traditionally. Bushcraft, obviously, it's you can use it to make your chairs, benches, beds, all number of things. Because it's straight and true, it's quite easy to work with. There isn't much in the way of branches. You will get little knobbly bits, but nothing you can't remove. So yeah, bushcraft wise, it has got a lot of benefits. You can also make a bow and drill set from this purely, although that wouldn't be my choice, but you can actually do that. You can make the drill board, the bow and the drill all from this, and even the cordage. It's quite good for cordage. Just take strips of it off, pop it in boiling water, make it all supple, and just play around with it for a bit, and eventually do a twist on it, and you've got yourself a half decent rope. It's a pleasure to make spoons out of, so long as it's wet. When it's dry, it's a little bit more tricky, but for spoons, it offers that natural resistance to pests and diseases and things for a short period. I'm sure that dissolves with time, but temporarily you have got this relatively clean environment spoon. Same with cradles, cribs, and even crowns for the babies, to try and create this sterile environment for them traditionally. Benefits for the sap, there's quite a few, but it's believed that it's good for eczema and psoriasis, skin disorders. Back in the day, that would also have been a lot of horrible skin disorders, no doubt, and this would help. It would be applied pretty much as is. It's widely known as a tree with many medicinal uses, very much a healing tree. The leaves themselves, they've got a diuretic abilities as well as antiseptic properties, so they're very useful. You can just rub them directly into the problem area, or preferably make a tea out of the leaves or something and drink it, and that will aid with any stomach cramps and gastral problems generally, but also urinal tract. It helps with that, any infections that might be in there. Traditionally it is used with kidney stones, to aid with the pain, I guess. I don't think that was an actual cure, whereas the stomach and the infection in the urinal tract, it would be a remedy for it. So again, I don't think that's a cure, is it? Remedy. It's debatable. Just pop a bit in a jar with, I don't know, about a dozen leaves. Pop it on the windowsill in the sunshine. Just let the oils merge together into a fusion, and then apply it as an ointment, kind of thing. The sap is also good for lots of potential skin ailments, like your eczemas and your psoriasis. I get a little bit of eczema sometimes, and I have found that drinking the drink does relieve it a little bit, so there's definitely something in that. But yeah, consumption of the sap is led to believe is good for the skin generally. Also, you can use the bark externally on a muscle injury, as that's meant to aid with that. I haven't tried that. I don't generally get, well, I've got a muscle injury up here. I guess I could maybe make myself a little pauldron. But yeah, but it's meant to aid with muscle problems and help it relax a little bit by applying a piece of the bark externally. I would of course do tests before you do any of these things. Just try a small amount of it, and if you get a reaction, it won't be too severe, will it? Even as little as just holding a piece on the wrist or something, just to see if it comes up with any problems, any spots or things like that. They are often the first to show their leaves in a woods, although that's not the case here, but ordinarily in a normal bit of woods they would be one of the earlier ones, definitely. In the highlands they would make their shepherd's crooks and sticks for guiding animals and whatnot, the sheep and the cows, and it was thought that because of the purification qualities of this wood, that just by touching the cow with it to sort of guide it along the way to return it back to the flock, the sheep, that would then make it fertile. And also, if the sheep or the cow was pregnant and they were guiding it back to the flock, it would mean that it would be a healthy calf. So again, everything it touches, it seems to have some kind of healing benefit, or thought to have had. I believe there's a lot of truth in that. Birch, the word also comes from Birch, which is to literally shine bright. On a full moon night, they will have almost a ghostly quality about them. really quite beautiful. And yeah, it was the word for shine bright. And Druids would drink the sap in the form of a cordial to celebrate the spring equinox. So it's steeped in many stories. Like I say, there is a Finnish tale, folklore, which is very much like Cinderella, but it involves two sheep and a witch and a black sheep. Shan't go into it, it's quite lengthy. So that just about concludes our birch identification and stories and uses. Unfortunately it's not very windy, otherwise we'd be leaving this with a nice little dance from these silver birch or Petulia pendula, the Lady of the Woods, rightfully named, and it will be the title for this episode of my ongoing tree identification playlist. I'm trying to make it as complete as possible, so if you think of something I've missed, which is probably a whole lot of stuff, but feel free just to comment anything you like, really, I don't care. I'm open for a chat or a debate, whatever. So thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe for more tree identifications. I shall be trying to go through every species that I can within means. I'm willing to travel a little bit, but I'm not made out of money. I'm made more out of trees, really. I'd prefer the trees to money. I know that the trees make the money, and that the money makes life, but I prefer just to go back to the start of everything, really, and have the trees, sod the money. But there you go. Take care, guys.